Good day everybody, I'm Roseanne from Curo. I'm the National Nursing Manager, and today I'd like to take you through the Momentum Multiply paperwork for when you do your wellness screenings for your Multiply clients. They have changed slightly from the previous video, so those of you who have watched the previous video, the information is still very relevant, except that the paperwork has changed slightly. So if you're a bit confused, if you do one now in the near future, you'll notice that there's things that are no longer on the form that were on the old one, that I spoke about in the old video, and things that are now there that weren't there in the previous one. Alright, so the first thing to remember is that your Multiply video or your Multiply Momentum screening will very definitely say in the top corner, Multiply. Please don't refer to it as a Discovery Vitality, because the two companies are very much arch rivals when it comes to wellnesses, and they want it to be referred to as a Multiply, please. The other thing that you'll see is that this form has two sides. One that says Individual Consent Form, and the other side that says HIV Testing and Counseling. So it's two different sides with two separate sets of information. And on the side that it says HIV is where you will be doing all your testing and signatures and resulting relating to HIV. On the side that says individual consent form is where you will do your normal, what we call health assessment information, your cholesterol, glucose, blood pressure, all that sort of stuff. Multiply will also, or Momentum will also book the clients with us, and you will be informed whether it is only what they call an HA or health assessment or an HA and HIV test. Please don't encourage your clients, as we do sometimes with the Vitality clients, to do an HIV test as well, because there's payments differences, and some of the levels of points allow or don't allow HIV testing. So if your client is booked for only an HA or a health assessment, then please do only an HA, and don't encourage or suggest to the client that they do an HIV as well. Also, when you are working on your Vitality or wellness days in the gyms and so forth, the person who's doing the payments and the check-ins when the clients come in to start their process with you will do the check-ins and balancings and any necessary payments that need to take place for HIVs or anything else before the time. So you will see on a little what we call the cheat sheet, which I'll show you in a different video, whether the client is going to have an HIV test or not. Also, what some of them do is on the back where it says HIV testing and counseling, they sometimes put a stripe through it, meaning the client is not paid or agreed to do an HIV testing. So that's the second thing that's quite important, please. The third thing, and this is the big difference between Multiply or Momentum Multiply and Discovery Vitality, is where with your Vitality you do not record your HIV result anywhere on the form. On your Multiply one, you do record the result of your HIV testing. If you have a look down over there, it says result in section C, and it says HIV test result, HIV with a little negative and with a little positive. So that's the third, and I want to say almost the most important difference between a Multiply and a Vitality. So in short, to summarize quickly again, it will definitely say Multiply. So the form is not the same as you use for your Vitalities. It will say Multiply. It has two sides, one side for your normal health assessment and the other side for your HIV information, which will be crossed through if the client is not having an HIV test. And thirdly, you will result your HIV or record your HIV result on your form for your Multiply. So just remember those three important factors, please. They are important, and they do play a role when the paperwork has to come through to the office to be fixed. So let's start with the most commonly used one, the individual consent form. Now it is what it says, an individual consent form. Right up at the top, and again my little mantra, as most of you know, is if there's a block or a stripe, it is there for a reason. It wants information. And because you or the client think that information is not relevant or important, doesn't give you the right to ignore it. So please, where it asks you for information, please record that information. In the top section, for example, it will ask you company. Now, mostly the multipliers are done at company wellness days. Big companies, for example, ABSA or Curo Health or whoever, will arrange with Multiply or Momentum Multiply to have a multiply screening for their company employees. So if it is at an ABSA day or a Curo Health day that you're doing Curo Health staff members, for example, just write in the top there, ABSA or Curo Health, whoever the company is that the client is working for. Then in the next one it says date, then it says the client's name and surname, the ID number of the client, whether the client is male or female, the email address of the client, the mobile number of the client, and the medical scheme and number of the client. That's important information, please, because these things need to be put onto a system where the points will be generated. If the client's payments and points cannot be processed, you're going to have a very unhappy client because they've paid for this test. But now, for lack of information, the ladies back at the office cannot log this information and thereby get the clients the points that they have paid for and worked for. So please ensure that everything is entered onto the form. Then the next section of your form is where you will put your clinical data. So as I always say, please do not put a needle in a client or any medical procedures with a client before you have signed consent right down at the bottom. The third section of this form is the non-smoker declaration. That is the little section of the client of the form, and I'll read it to you. I, and a space where the client can fill in their name, confirm that I am a non-smoker and that I do not smoke and have not used any tobacco products regularly or recreationally in the last year. If I start smoking, I agree to inform Multiply within 3 months. I also agree to the reversal of any Multiply rewards I may have received for being a non-smoker if I receive them in the same calendar year in which I started smoking. I agree to undergo a cotinine test to prove my non-smoking status if Multiply requests it. I understand that Multiply makes such requests randomly. And then a little block that they need to tick that says, I accept the above terms and conditions. Then their signature, and then if you indicated that you are a non-smoker while completing the Virgin Life Care fitness assessment, you have automatically received non-smoker declaration points. Again, it's important to note there that this makes note that the client, I do not smoke and have not used any tobacco products regularly or recreationally in the last year. So it's quite a long time span for your clients. It's not up to you to say to the client, excuse me, ma'am or sir, but you smell like cigarettes. I don't think I quite agree with your declaration. The client must fill in that, the client puts that tick, and the client signs over there. So it's the client declaring that they are a non-smoker. If the client is a smoker, it's up to you. What I normally suggest is then just to put a stripe through it and say non-applicable. Because it sometimes happens that if you don't fill in something, somebody thinks you've forgotten to fill it in or just ignored it. So to indicate that you have taken note of it or the client has seen what it is that's needed to be filled in, just put a stripe through it and say not applicable. Then at the bottom you'll see there's a space for the client's name. I'll show you up nice and close. The client's name and the client's signature. Please get those signatures and names before you do any of your procedures because they give you authority to be allowed to do those procedures with a client. Then in your middle section where you will be doing your medical recording of things, you'll see that there too is a space where the client needs to sign. Please let them sign there as well before you do your procedures. Now in those spaces you'll see there's height, blood pressure, and it's broken into systolic and diastolic, weight, glucose, waist circumference, BMI, cholesterol, and ad hoc. Please ignore the ad hoc. You don't need to write anything in there. But all your others, except for the BMI, you can fill in please, or you must fill in please. It's not a request, you must fill it in. Because again, if For example, your glucose machine is not working, or your client said, no, but I don't want the cholesterol. It's a total package. It's only the HIV that is an optional extra. The others are a total package. If one of those readings is not recorded, then again the points cannot be allocated, and again the client is then paid for something that they cannot benefit from. So please make sure that you get all the readings, all the requested information in, and that it's recorded correctly. The other thing that I please just want to remind you folks about is when you use your tape measures, make sure that they are on the centimeter side, not on the inches side. We have in the past had 1 or 2 incidences where the inches measurement has been recorded, and if you look at your inch tape measure compared to a centimeter, there is a huge difference between the 2 readings. So please ensure that you use centimeters on your tape machine and record it correctly. Then there's spaces for dates, which you must please record, and then right down at the bottom there's a place for your name and your signature and the dates. Fairly straightforward, no rocket science. If we look at the HIV testing and consent side, there's quite a bit of information, and I'm not going to go through it all right now, but again, in the very top section is your client's information. Please don't put a stripe through it and say, see on the other side. Again, it's asking you for information because it wants information. So fill it in. Then the middle section is for your client to fill in, and it is about consent and informed consent and so on. Yet again, if your client is not informed about HIV or asks you 1 or 2 questions that makes you realize that the client needs more information, please refer them to the toll-free number, which is on your rapid Assisa things, or on your cell phone numbers, or at the back of the Metropolis Lab form if you haven't seen it there yet. Please refer them to that, and then do not do the HIV test. You can continue with all the other testings, but don't do the HIV if your client is not informed about it. But that little section on your form is your client saying, I'm okay, I know what HIV is, I don't need any more information right now, thank you, I'm accepting the test. So get them to sign that and fill that in again before you do the test. Then the third section, or section B as it's named here, is entitled Personal Risk Assessment, and it says clearly in brackets, to be completed by the client for a very specific reason. Those are fairly sensitive questions. Now, if you are at a wellness or a multiplied day where there's many people around you and you ask these questions out aloud, you're going to be quite embarrassed, and your client is not going to be very impressed with you, because the questions are: have you had unprotected sexual intercourse with more than 1 partner in the last 12 months? And the client must then answer yes or no. The second question is, have you had sex while under the influence of alcohol or drugs during the past 12 months? Again, yes or no. Then, if you have answered yes to any of these questions, you will be considered to be at an increased risk of contracting HIV/AIDS. HIV is the virus that causes AIDS. This virus can transmit through unprotected sexual, and in brackets, vaginal, anal, or oral sex with a partner that has HIV. Contact with blood when sharing needles, and in brackets, piercing, tattooing, drug equipment, including needles, by HIV-infected pregnant women to their infants during pregnancy or delivery, and while breastfeeding. So that is the information that is in that little sexual habits piece. So you can think for yourself, if you're sitting in a big open hall and you read that out to a client and there's a bit of noise and he says, excuse me, I didn't hear you, and you've got to repeat the question a bit louder, it's going to cause some embarrassment. So please put these questions in front of your client, give them a pen, give them a minute, let them fill it in themselves, and then you are quite happy. All right. You will then do your HIV test, which I'll show you in another little video, and then you will, in what's called here section C, record your HIV result. So you'll just put across over HIV negative or HIV positive. All right. Then the very bottom section again is where your client would have signed before you did the procedure, and your name and signature can go at the bottom over there again, and then again the date. Now, what the multiply form does not have on, which is a little bit missing, and we just want you to do it as an extra, please. Again, forms and paperwork sometimes go missing or waylaid during the process of a multiply, the madness of packing up, the craziness of, okay, let's get out of here, let's go home. And paperwork sometimes lands up in bags or boxes or in boots of cars or somewhere where the package isn't taken through and brought through to the office so that the data capture ladies can do the points. So all I'm asking you is, on the bottom of either side of the form, whichever side you've used, if you've used the individual consent form side, then write down at the bottom, just make a number 1 for your first client. For your second client, make a number 2. For your third one, make a number 3, and so on until the end of the day. At the end of the day, take your little pile of paperwork, count how many forms you have in your little pile that you have done, and then next to your 1, put a slash and write the total. For example, 12. If you've done 12 multiplies for the day, then your paperwork would run 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12, etc. Because that gives the ladies at the office an idea of if there is any paperwork missing. Again, clients have made the effort to come for the screening, they've paid for the screening, they've had the discomfort of having a finger pricked, and now because their form is missing or lost, they cannot get the points. So understandably, they will be a bit upset. So that is very quickly and briefly the paperwork, but again, it's not rocket science. Please, if you read it, and the old point where there's a block or a stripe for a reason, please put the information in, except in this case the ad hoc block or the BMI block. You can ignore those two on this one. Right. Thank you. I hope you enjoy your multiply days. They really are fun days. They're nice, they're interactive, there's a vibe about them. It's a friendly group, and it's nice to interact with our colleagues sometimes when we are used to being on the road by ourselves in our own spaces. The password for this video is HIV. Thank you. Enjoy them. Goodbye.